My name's Maria. I'm going to be talking about building better with Drupal, practical tools for accessible websites. I started prepping for this talk and I got really excited by loads of stuff, went down loads of rabbit holes. So I'm just going to tell you what I got excited about today. But first, this is me. I'm Maria Young. I'm a Drupal developer and accessibility lead. Maria.y on Drupal.org, MSA Young on GitHub. I am a certified professional in web accessibility by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. I really recommend this certification. There's two different certifications you can do. One called Competencies, one Web Accessibility Specialist. It's just so thorough and really interesting background knowledge, and the Web Accessibility Specialist one is very, very in-depth. So yeah, I've been doing Drupal for 12, 13 years and specializing in accessibility for the past 5, 6, 7, something like that. I work for a company called Agile Collective. Here are some of our faces. We are a web agency based in the UK, Sweden, Italy, Morocco. And look, there's a space there because we're hiring at the moment. So you could go and find out about that if you find this talk interesting, or if not. Here is what I'm going to talk about. Do a bit of introductions to accessibility, that kind of stuff. Drupal as an accessibility first CMS. And then some practical tools, practical tips, tools for building an accessible website. I'm going to break into a live demo, which no doubt will go terribly wrong. And then I'm going to give you some inspirational closing thoughts, hopefully. And then we'll have a Q&A, hopefully, if there's time. So, what is accessibility? Digital accessibility is the inclusive practice of ensuring that everyone has equal access to information, functionality, and experience on digital platforms. That's one definition. It's one of the core principles of inclusive design and UX. We had a great talk earlier about usability UX, and accessibility is one of the fundamental pillars of that. And UX is one of the fundamental pillars of accessibility too. So there's a lot of overlap. And so accessibility focuses in on making sure that people with disabilities and impairments can perceive, operate, and understand a website or digital platform. So we're focusing in on disability, but when we do that, as if by magic, that product becomes usable to people who don't necessarily think of themselves as having a disability right now or ever. In the future, we might all, well, hopefully we'll all get older, and things come with age, don't they? So just some of the key principles around accessibility. So people are varied and unique. Right, so I'm just going to go through some of the aspects of accessibility that we think about. I'm not defining people here. It's just ways to think about accessibility, especially when putting it into practice. I shouldn't flail around so much. Okay, so what kind of thing are we talking about? So usually we talk about 5 different types of accessibility need we might have. So cognitive, to do with how we process information. A lot of disabilities that fall into that category are dyslexia, reading disabilities, as well as some of the common side effects to things like anxiety, depression, stress, like I have now. Visual. We might be talking about blindness at one end of a spectrum, but we might also be talking about color blindness or light sensitivity, that kind of thing. Auditory, to do with hearing. Physical, motor abilities, maybe not having really accurate fine motor control, or maybe something bigger like a loss of limb. And then speech-related. There's also some others, but they're the broad ones. Briefly, assistive technology and adaptive strategies. So there are some ways that assistive technologies are usually software or hardware that people use to help them operate, usually a website or their computer. Some of them are here. Keyboard navigation is more of an adaptive strategy, so using a keyboard to operate your computer instead of a pointing device like a mouse or your finger for a touchscreen. Keyboard navigation is really important because a lot of assistive technology is built on the backbone of that. So if it works with a keyboard navigation, it'll also it'll work for other assistive technologies. Screen readers are a piece of software you can install on your computer, which will read the content and structure of, let's say, a web page to you. It will read it back to you in sound, or it can be plugged into a braille device, refreshable braille device. Voice activation, that's when you actually talk to your computer or device and operate the computer through speech. And screen magnification, that's, again, another piece of software that will act like a digital magnifying glass and zoom in on, maybe a section of your website up to extremely high magnification. And they're often used alongside screen readers as well. I'm telling you this because some of these will come up later in the talk. Move on, maybe. Oh, seem to have the same slide hundreds of times. So I mentioned in the blurb about this talk about the European Accessibility Act. So very briefly, we'll talk about that. So there's a few legislations around accessibility that we need to be aware of in this country. So it started with the EU Web Accessibility Directive. That was made into regional law in the UK. First with the UK Public Sector Bodies Accessibility Regulations 2018, which is aligned with the one above and affects public sector websites mostly. But now we have coming down the line the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, which is covers a much broader range of technologies and also private sector websites. It will apply to any business that wants to trade in the EU, no matter where that business is based. So it will affect the UK, just in case you thought we got out of that. We did not. So it will be implemented through at the regional level. So, for example, Ireland have come up with their own legislation about how this will be enforced. Penalties for not conforming can get as high as fines and prison sentences. So it's being taken really seriously, and it's a great thing. Most of the legislation comes back to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are a set of technical standards to ensure that your digital content is accessible, with an asterisk, so I'll come back to that. We're currently on version 2.2, came out last year. It's based around 4 principles of, I'll give you a slide, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable, making sure that the information and your interface is perceivable, that it can be operated, must be keyboard accessible, navigable, and compatible with other input methods, understandable. It needs to be readable, predictable, and clear, and robust, that it works across a lot of devices and technologies. Okay, let's go on. beyond compliance. Okay, compliance is great. It's the baseline. We are aspiring to something much, much bigger than compliance. Compliance requires the web content accessibility guidelines are based on things that can be tested. And a lot of accessibility cannot be tested with a true or false thing. You know, there's a spectrum. So anything that's in the web content accessibility guidelines are things that you can go check. Yes, I've done that. But that's not how accessibility works. It's much more nuanced than that. So that's why I say, yeah, compliance is the baseline. Accessibility is a journey. We're always learning. We're trying to get better. It's never done. Okay. So Drupal. Let's talk about Drupal. Drupal, in part of my day job, I do a lot of, I'm a developer, but I also do a lot of auditing and consultancy and design work around accessibility. When I audit sites, I audit all sorts of sites, not just Drupal sites. The Drupal sites are always a lot better. There's a lot of stuff that's already thought about in Drupal and we don't need to think about as developers. And that comes down to a lot of things. But first, I'm going to just give a shout out to the accessibility community. I put these faces up before I knew who was in the room, so yeah, just some people that I was inspired by even just writing this talk today. The accessibility community in Drupal is extraordinary, really so generous with their time. And I'm in a lot of Slack channels around accessibility. There's always a Drupal channel there. And it's always the best channel. People are they're always giving help, always sharing their knowledge, and driving accessibility forward. We've got things in the Drupal ecosystem. We've got Drupal coding, accessibility coding standards. We've got accessibility core maintainers. We've also got an accessibility gate, which is a series of tests that a core contribution must pass before it's included into Drupal core. Here is some of the rules that it has to pass. It's actually, the first one is huge, but the other ones are important too. So that conforms to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.2, and one that's not heard of so much is the Authoring Tools Accessibility Guidelines, which is making sure that the interface encourages, well, it's accessible itself, and it encourages the just lost the word, creation of accessible content. And some other things here. So the HTML structure also meets WCAG 2.2. Text color is of sufficient contrast. Form fields are labeled. And JavaScript is keyboard usable. Actually, those four all really fit under the first one, but it's worth pulling them out as well. So some of the core accessibility features that we have already, there's loads. Semantic HTML. That's another talk. I'm not going to go into that, but it's there. We have some accessible base themes, Olivero, and Claro admin theme, inline form errors. Last time I checked was an optional module in core, which you're encouraged to put on by default, but makes form errors much more accessible. And there's also some JavaScript tools like Drupal announce and constrain tabbing. There's a lot of documentation on that. Look at it. Oh, and I just want to say as well about the accessibility track in Drupal CMS, which is huge, which I think maybe you could talk about in the Q&A about some of the tools that are coming with that. There's also, obviously, a huge ecosystem of contrib modules for enhanced accessibility. I'll give you a demo of some of these in a minute. Here's a few. Editorially, Site Improve, which plugs into your paid-in service. Sally, LocalGov Sally, accessibility toolbar, block area, landmark roles. The list is big. Okay, next bit. Building the Drupal website with accessibility in mind. So, got some notes here. It's like building an accessible website it starts way back before you actually start building the website, right? So you need to the designers need to be involved. They need to be, they need to know what they're doing. And then I'm more of in that part of my job, more of a developer. So when I then need to interpret those designs into something that's got semantic markup that works well, we also need to think about what's going to happen when the editors come into the site and start adding content, and how to support them in that. Let's move on. So I'm going to talk about a few things. A bit wide-ranging. Some of them you'll have probably heard of already. You're welcome to have a nap during those bits. I'm going to start with alternative text for images, which you probably heard lots about in your life, but it is, by the WebAIM Million survey last year's, the second most common error found on websites, homepages, missing alternative text for images. So it's still an important thing, worth going over. There's a bit of nuance in it. So assistive technology requires text. Images need to have a text alternative for an assistive technology like a screen reader to be able to convey that information to the user. That text needs to be informative. So it needs to describe the image, but it also wants to describe the intent of that image. So the reason you, as an editor, added that image to the page. So, as an example, maybe. Here is an image that the kind DrupalCamp organisers chose as my profile picture for this camp. In the context of the website, what you wanted is to be able to distinguish me from the other speakers. So you just need to see my face. But that original image I've used in my gallery of my around the world bike trip, which you can talk to me about later. In that context, you probably are more interested in seeing the landscape and the eating arrangements that we had on a day-to-day basis, for example. So that would influence the alt text, the alternative text that we use for the image, depending on the context it was used. So, since Drupal 8, alternative text has been required by default. This is great step forward. Here's a screenshot of the image field, the alternative text field there, and you can see the required mark. Super. But let's say we want to use that same image in a different context elsewhere on the site. And so it wants to have different alt text in that. So then we can do this in the WYSIWYG. If you're in your WYSIWYG, in the CK editor, you can click on your image and you can override the alt text in this context. So there's a little screenshot there. We've got a little pop-up that says default alternative text. The original one is bike in the desert, and the alternative text reads teal surly touring bike. So in the context we've used it, we can override the alt text. Great, so that's already in Drupal already. Another option is if in your structured content, so outside of the body field, this is one way that I've done it in the past. So we've got, this is like an image paragraph, for paragraph module. We've got the image field, caption, and then some optional fields at the bottom. So that allows you to do the same thing, and some contextual text, which will override it in that circumstance. And there's also a checkbox there to mark it decorative. I'll come to that in a second. So decorative images. Sometimes the image is adding no value other than eye candy. And in order to tone down the amount of information that you're giving to your screen reader user, for example, you might want to mark this image as decorative. So don't bother announcing this. I've said it somewhere else. You know, you might just be repeating the same thing that's in text. So then you still need to have your alt attribute in the HTML, but it needs to be empty. And that's considered decorative. So you can do it the way I showed before. There's also a decorative image widget module in Contrib, which just allows you a bit of setup. This is back to our original image field. The alternative text in the first screenshot there is still required, but you can see there's a checkbox at the bottom which allows you to mark it decorative. Once you've marked that, checked it, the alternative text becomes empty. It's, you know, you've got to understand how well trained your users are, your content editors are, because people, if they're in a rush, might just mark that and say, I promise I'll come back to it later, and then they forget. So, you know, it all requires a bit of training. I'll just mention briefly, there's another module out there called Automatic Alternative Text, which uses AI, let's say, to generate alternative text for images when there's none been provided. I am yet to see it working well. Thinking back to what we said about contextual alt text, can AI understand the context of this image? There's a lot of things that need to be worked around with it. I'm not saying it's not one of the tools to use, but it's definitely not one to be relied on. You know, all the social media platforms, most of them are using something like this at the moment. When you upload an image, they'll suggest some alt text and you can override it. Is it better than having none? Probably. Could it be problematic? Probably. Anyway, I'm sure it can be used responsibly. Okay, so next thing. This is where I'm going to try and go into a live demo. So providing instant-ish feedback to your editors. So this is something I'm quite excited about, and I've implemented it on sites in various ways. So your editor is, so I've got a local instance of Drupal here with the umami demo theme and content, just to play about with to show you this today. And I've just loaded some stuff on it so that we can see. So we're going to look at first of all, the editorially module. So that's where the L's are at the end, it's 2 1s, if you want to find it. So what this looks like, if we go to an article, let's have a look at this one. So we can edit this, and here's our WYSIWYG. I'll just show you a couple of other things that I set up while we're here. So just going to add an image and show you that, okay, I can't use this today, right? The alternative alt text. And so we click on this now, and here's this default. This is where we can override the contextual alt text. And I'm just going to put something in here. This is for the demonstration purpose. I've written an image of a quiche, so that's overridden that. And also in our CK editor, we've got we can set our heading levels. Something you should always do in your CK editor setup. Allow people to do proper headings rather than just make text big and use semantic markup. So we've got an H2 here, and then if it's followed by an H3, I'm going to make that again for this purpose of this. I'm going to make it an H4, and we'll find out about that. And I'll also just add a little read more link. And we'll link that. Okay, so we'll save this, and I'll show you what feedback we get. So once we've saved it, we can come back to the page, and this little toolbar pops up here. that tells you we've got 3 issues detected on the page. And here they are. So it's going to tell us, if we hover over that, it's going to say the image's alt text is image of a quiche. And then it gives us a bit of blurb around why this might not be the best alt text. We don't need to say it's image of a quiche, because the screen reader is already going to announce that it's an image. So we've just got some redundant words there that's just going to muddle what people are hearing. But we can hide that if it's really the right alt text. We can hide that for now. And we can see that there's some other ones here. So this one's now over the read more link that I added. And it's going to tell us that read more, generic links like read more, require a bit more cognitive thinking. And it's also really not helpful for screen reader users who often bring up just a list of all the links on a page. So having context to where that link's going is really useful. And then it's also going to tell us about skipping heading levels and why that's a bad thing. So why this is really useful is like giving content editors almost immediate feedback when they're writing means they can just go and fix it. They don't have to wait until someone's like audited their site and come back by the time they've forgotten what they were writing about in the first place. And hopefully, you'll see people correcting errors, learning more, not making errors, and getting better. You can also, in this thing, you can just show all the alt text on the page, and you can also see an outline of the heading structure on the page. It's also got a nice thing, this module. If we go to the reports, we can see all of the accessibility issues on the site. So as a sort of maybe website owner, you can go and review where all the issues are on the site. Today, maybe you want to go and fix all of the alt text on the site, and so you can go through and just look at all of the alt text, or you can probably see who the worst offenders are too. And you can also see, that you can dismiss things, you can mark things as not correct, that the feedback wasn't correct. It's a clever site. It's based on the Sally library or module, and I know the two developers of both of those things are working well, working closely together to make sure they both get better.
Is the editorially module?
This one is the editorially module, yes. How are we doing for time? I'm running out of time already, great. Maybe I'll move on then. Right. If we've got time, I'll talk as well. I was going to show you the content readability and reading rating modules that are also out in Contrib. They use some algorithms to give the complexity of your text a score and give you an estimate of how much education someone has to have been through to be able to understand the content of your page. They're sort of not subtle tools, but they can be useful, again, for giving feedback. And you can customize them to be appropriate for your audience or your page. Okay, we're going to talk, this is a bit more for maybe the front-end devs. We're going to talk a little bit about hiding content properly. So often we need to hide content for one reason or another. The question is always asking yourself, why are we hiding it and from whom? So we can make content visually hidden, but still available to assistive technology. We can make content visually available, but hidden from assistive technology. And we can also make things just hidden to everyone, maybe in the state or maybe always. So we'll go through a few things. So here is hiding content. So this is looking at the visually hidden class that we can apply to things. So I've got a screenshot here of 2 of the cards from the Umami site. There's 2 recipes, and both of them you'll see have links at the bottom pointing to view recipe. As we learnt, these aren't very useful links in and of themselves, but to write, maybe the designer said, we can't write too many words there. So how can we make that a more accessible link? As it happens, this is a simplified code snippet of what we've got there, of the link. So we've got the link tag, we've got the words view recipe, which are the ones that we can see, and then wrapped in a span with the class of visually hidden, we've got the title of the article it's linking to. So a screen reader will hear that, or read that as view recipe, borscht with pork cribs. But visually we can see just the view recipe bit. Yeah, there's the recommended visually hidden CSS. Note, we're not using display none here. We'll come back to that later, but this is recommended as the best way to do that. But we must never use this on a focusable element, an interactive element, because we always need to be able to see the item that's in focus at the time. For example, oh no, hang on. I was going to tell you about this. Back to visually hidden, you can often mark, so in your managed display of your entity, you can usually mark the label as visually hidden or hidden. Yeah, so this is possible. This is an example you might not want to do it on this field, which is a media image. So what that will give us in the markup, if we did set that, is we would have the markup for media image, and then we'll be told it's an image. So it's unnecessary, again, just adds more noise, and it's unnecessary. I've seen this a lot in things. People think, I better just add it in just in case. More is better, but it's not always true. So back to the focusable elements. So for example, you'll have all come across the skip to main content link, which is often the first link on the page, and it often only appears when you tab to it. So if you're using a keyboard to navigate, you tab through the links, and this one comes up. So we want it to be visible when it's in focus. We don't really care about it being there most of the time. So then we will often add the focusable class too, and along with the CSS from the last slide, we'll add something like this to make sure that when it's in focus, it overrides what the position was, and so that we can see it. And you often need to bring it to the top of the stack too, depending on your design. Area hidden. Aria, should have given some context to Aria. Aria is a language that was added to bridge the gap between HTML and accessibility tools. You need to use it with care. It gets used not well often. What Aria Hidden True does is it will hide the content to assistive technology, but it will still be visible on the screen. So here is, your social links, and we've got your Facebook link, and then we've got the word written out for Facebook. So maybe we want to hide the image there so that it doesn't read Facebook. So we've got our span with Aria Hidden True, with the image there, and then we've got the visible link Twitter. What we wouldn't want to do is this, which is the other way around. We've got our image with the alternative text, and then we've Aria hidden the visible text because someone's nicely added the alternative text to be, they've updated it, it's X now, whereas what we're seeing on the screen is Twitter. And this is good. This is people who use voice activation software are going to run into issues with this because they're going to say click Twitter. But the accessibility tree, which is what determines what things are called, is going to think it's called X because that's the text you've supplied it. So you've just got to be careful. This is why it's really important to test a lot across a lot of different devices because things can trip you up. Okay. I'm going to skip on because I know I'm running out of time, and I've got far too many exciting things to talk about. User preferences. Okay, we'll do this very briefly. This is another area of accessibility that you can think about. which is how to allow your users to customize the website so it works better for them. There's a couple of modules available. Oh, I just remembered one of them doesn't work when the other one's on, so I'm only going to show you one. And it's this one. It's called the Fluid UI module. And this shows for all your users. I'm logged in at the moment, but it will show to your logged out users. And this just opens a little thing. And it lets you increase your text size. You can override the actual font that's being used. You can increase your line spacing. And you can, put it into dark mode. And it just overrides the CSS on your website. Make sure that people have these preferences, and it'll save it for when they return to the site. I'm sure you can customize it yourself, but it's a nice thing. It also generates a table of contents, I assume, from the headings on the page. And you can hide that, or you can reset it. So that's another thing you can think about adding to your site. Again, use it with care. Again, test it thoroughly. Yeah, okay. What else can I tell you? Oh, I'm moving on, but I'm still there. Right. So a little bit about testing. It's really important to learn from people with disabilities, and it's really easy to do. There's loads of podcasts and webinars and articles written by people from their first-hand experience. I really recommend doing user testing with people with disabilities. There's some great agencies who specialize in that. Get yourself in front of people, get them to use your website. You just learn so much. Start just by navigating your site with a keyboard. Learn how to do that. You just need to hit the tab key and some arrow keys, space key. Sorted. If things aren't working, find out why. You'll learn loads. There's some few browser extensions that will help, and yeah, build automated testing in. It doesn't catch everything, but it will catch some of the low-hanging fruit. And here's where I was supposed to come up with some inspirational thoughts. Yeah, just like perfection, perfection isn't the goal. Like, just try and get a little bit better. Just learn a little bit more, implement it, get involved in the community, ask questions. It really is a team sport. It's like, just step in. The water's lovely, as they say. Okay, I don't think we've got time for questions, but are there any? Yeah, I often use the Digital Accessibility Centre. Digital Accessibility Centre, DAC, based in Wales, I think. And they do all sorts of things like audits and what have you. They have lots of people who use a wide range of assistive technology employed to do the audits. But you can also, I just set up an hour call with them, put them in front of the website, do some testing, just have a chat, and it's always fascinating.
Thank you for a great presentation. I have a question for the personalization settings.
Yeah.
Also, some tools that you can add to the website to increase contrast and so forth. My question is that really helpful for people with disabilities, or do they have their own devices in place in the first place, and that's actually just
super interesting? Yes. I mean, you need to know your users. There is an argument to say that, for example, in this case, people might not know what they need yet. So, but often people have already got their devices set up, their browsers set up in a way that works for them. So yeah, use with care and know your users and test. And this is not like an accessibility overlay, these ones. I will not talk about that here, but they are often actually get in the way of people's actual software that they're already using, and you definitely need to avoid doing that. Yeah.
Please don't use accessibility
Yes. Okay, thank you.